So we planned to bring you the review of this Thermaltake case towards the end of last year. However, when we tried to install this motherboard in the case, we stumbled upon a problem. We reached out to Thermaltake about this issue and they quickly got back in touch with us saying that yes, there was a problem with the design of this motherboard tray and they were sending the case back to their engineers to revise the motherboard tray to resolve the problem. So 3 months have gone by and now we have the revised version of the Thermaltake Divider 200 TG Air. It's sat here on the bench with me. So we can carry on with the review and see whether all the effort was worth it. So because the only change with this new version is the Kitguru revised motherboard tray, we are going to be using some of the footage from the original review because all that is still relevant footage, going through the features and the spec of this case, and then where we would have come against the issue originally, we're going to switch to the new case, show you that the motherboard does now fit, and then continue with the build and testing, and then give you our final thoughts on the case. Thermaltake's Divider series, they all share a very similar design motto with this diagonally split side panel design. All the other cases so far in the series have been conventional ATX tower designs with a vertical layout. This one's a little bit different. It has a horizontally mounted motherboard and sort of a dual chamber design, so all the components, motherboard, graphics card, your CPU cooler, etc. fit in the top compartment, and then in the bottom of the case, in this bottom chamber, you can fit your power supply and your storage drive. So this different layout does make it a little bit more interesting, I guess. One thing I'm sure we'll all agree on with this new case is the name seems to be a bit ridiculously long. This is the Thermaltake Divider 200 TG Air Snow. The Divider series, they all have this split side panel design. It does give them a unique look. It's definitely different to most cases on the market. I mean, this one has also got like this indentation on the steel panel, so this is steel and glass on this side. One thing I've noticed straight away that I want to mention about this is this vent, this tiny vent in this side panel. It doesn't seem to be doing much, so I'm thinking that's just there for aesthetic reasons. It's got a dust filter in it as well. It actually only, covers this indentation area, but then the dust filter's there in the indentation, but then when you look up at the glass, there's actually a gap between the filter and the glass anyway, so air and dust will probably be sucked in, and it's not a very good fit on the panel either because the panel has that indentation, but the plastic mould of the vent is straight, so I don't really like that. To be honest, I think probably Thermaltake could have just made this one panel but still had it split. I think it probably would have looked better. The quality of that fit for me isn't very good, especially when you consider this case is going to cost you about £150 in the UK. There's also a black version which I think is about £10 cheaper, so it's not a cheap case, so I'd expect slightly better build quality than that. The rest of the case, build quality doesn't look too bad. The white coating is a bit of an issue on all white cases. The different materials, you're going to get a different shade of white, so the steel panels are a slightly different colour to the white glass panels, and then those are a slightly different colour to any white plastic panels, such as this front I/O and this plastic dust filter. You do tend to get that with white cases. There's so many different shades of white. Matching the shades isn't easy, but I suppose if Thermaltake had just taken like a scan of this white, I guess they could have probably made a better match with the powder coated or painted steel panels. Either that, or maybe they should have put like a steel frame around that glass, painted it the same colour or powder coated the same colour as the side panels. But you do get that variation with white. Black cases, it's not as big an issue. Like I said, that's a problem with white cases. You do tend to get those different shades, so I'm not going to knock it too much on that. One other thing as well with these side panels is you can remove them in two pieces. So the lower half is held on with thumb screws. You just remove the thumb screws. Not captive. Again, I would have liked to see captive thumb screws on a case of this price. So the bottom piece then just slides out and you can remove that. which is great. And then the top piece is clipped in position, so they're nice and easy to remove. You turn the case round, you can see at this side you've got two steel panels and a nice big air vent in there. That's for, you know, airflow to fans or a CPU cooler. But what I would have liked to have seen is to be able to maybe swap the steel vented panel and be able to put it on this side, just in case you've got, say, quite a thick graphics card, 3-slot card maybe, that pulls it a bit closer to this side panel. There is potential that it could slightly choke airflow with the solid glass and steel panel. So I would have liked to have seen the option to be able to move the steel vented side panel to this side. The front panel is very open. On the front face of the front panel, it's got this perforated metal mesh design. These are little Thermaltake T logos. And then as well as that, on the front, down the sides, both sides, you've got a large air vent as well. So potentially having that solid panel on this side, it might not be that much of a problem. You might get adequate airflow to your GPU through the front panel. To remove this front panel, it's again quite simple. Just pulls off. It's just held in place by these quick release fittings. And then behind the front panel is a dust filter that covers the front fan. Again, that's just magnetic. It hooks in place at the bottom and then some magnets hold it in position. And then as you can see behind that, coming as standard is a 200mm fan. No RGB, so it's just a plain black fan. You could also swap that out for up to 240mm fans or 220mm fans as well. But it comes with a 200mm fan. I quite like 200mm fans because they tend to be able to run at a slower RPM but still move a lot of air. So generally 200mm fans are pretty quiet. And as you can see, the panel that holds the fan in place, it's mounted to the chassis with 6 screws, 3 down either side, and then that's removable as well. The reason for that is because on that front panel you could also install up to a 280mm radiator, 280mm AIO, so that just makes it easier for installing the radiator or the AIO. And then we've already seen round this side, really open once you remove the side panel. And then again, spin the case round. The bottom portion, like I say, that comes off with the thumb screws, and then this top bit of this steel panel is just held on with the same kind of quick release clips. You do get a bag with air filters as well, so there's 3 air filters in the bag, and 2 of those are for the steel side panel. So they're just the cheaper magnetic style perforated metal filters, so one goes onto that panel and the other is a bit smaller, and that fits on to the other steel side panel, so you can have that as a intake that is filtered as well. There's another rectangular magnetic filter as well, and according to the manual that just goes over this bottom vent as well. You can also see that the power supply fan, that's also vented. And again, if I just flip the case around, you can see on this bottom panel there's 2 more thumb screws. Take those out, and then the case floor also removes, and that gives you access into the bottom chamber of the case. Power supply fits at this side, and then you've got some drive bays here, so there's 3 3.5-inch drive bays. You could, if you wanted to, alternatively fit 3 2.5-inch drives in there, because these slide out, and the 3.5-inch drives, they fit in there. It's like a tool-free installation, but your 2.5-inch drives would also mount in mechanically with screws. So you have either 3.5 or 2.5-inch drives there. As I say, power supply fits there as well. I guess this dual chamber design should make it easier to hide cables, I guess. Then if you flip the case round to this side, you can see there's more 2.5-inch drive bays there, 3 more again, so you could have a total of 6 2.5-inch drives in there. Top panel also lifts out, and as you can see, that's a pretty clear, very lightly tinted, if at all, tempered glass side panel. In fact, I think we've got a peel to do here. Oh, it's a tough one. So you can see that's got a very mild tint to it, I think. but it gives you a nice view into the system, having a mild tint. So front panel connectivity, you have two USB 3.0 Type A ports, a USB Type C port, two audio jacks, headphones and microphones, 3.5mm jacks, big power button in the middle, and then a reset button on the top. And then as you can see, once you've removed all the panels, it's a very open chassis. There's easy access in from the side and in from the top. Motherboard supported in this is only micro ATX, so that means you could fit either a micro ATX or a mini ITX motherboard inside the case. There isn't support for a full ATX board, which is a shame, I suppose, but I don't mind the micro ATX form factor. If you're using your system for gaming, I think micro ATX is a good form factor for gaming. You only need one graphics card these days, so you might not need the extra length of a full-size motherboard, unless maybe you want to fit a lot of M.2 drives. I guess full ATX boards are good for that, but for the majority of gamers, I think a micro ATX board is good enough. If you can find one that you like, they don't tend to be in favour with the vendors as much these days, micro ATX. In terms of cooling support, as I've already said, up front, you've got this 200mm fan pre-installed. Alternatively, you can fit two 140mm fans, two 120mm fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. And then on the side, you've got this radiator bracket or fan bracket. In there, you could fit either two 120mm fans, two 140mm fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. This bracket does remove as well, so there's one screw at the front and then two on this side. So you move those screws, that just lifts out pretty easily, and then again it makes it even more open, more access from this side. As you can see, even with all the panels removed, it still is quite sturdy, so build quality looks pretty good. One thing that I'm not so happy about is these motherboard standoffs. They're kind of pressed or punched out of the steel. The problem with that is they have slightly more area that contacts with the motherboard compared to, you know, your conventional screw-in standoffs. So potentially having that more contact area with the motherboard, you are potentially opening up to maybe more chance of like shorting something out. So I'd prefer to see the screw-in standoffs rather than those. And then in the rear panel, you've got a pre-installed 120mm fan. Again, this is just a plain black fan, no RGB lighting, which is a surprise with Thermaltake. That's configured as an exhaust, so exhausting the warm air out. Below that, you've got the rear I/O cutout, and then below that, the power supply cutout. There's another vent down here where the drives will be, so maybe this fan will allow for a bit of airflow across your drives as well. 5 PCIe cutouts. And then, surprisingly, at the top, you've got one of these cutouts with a rubber grommet on. I think they're for routing soft tubing out or water cooling tubing out of to a pump, res or radiator or something like that. I've not seen one of those in a case for a while. They used to be in cases all the time, like 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I've not seen one for a while, so I'm not sure whether that's still a thing, is it? Let me know if you use something that you have externally and tubing going through the chassis. I might be wrong, but let me know in the comment section if that is useful. I forgot to mention also you could fit two 120mm fans in this bottom panel of the case as well, if needed. But then in terms of actual hardware support, so like I've said already, micro ATX motherboard supported and mini ITX. Maximum CPU cooler height is 185mm, so I think any dual tower air cooler should fit in this case. Generally it's up to like 165, 170mm supported, so 185mm is really good. Thumbs up for that. And then maximum graphics card length is 340mm long if you have no radiator installed at the front. If you do install a 27mm thick radiator, that reduces the maximum graphics card length to 310mm. Again, should be enough for most graphics cards. So we're looking at high spec hardware support in here. And then at the bottom, maximum power supply length is 200mm if you don't install a fan on the floor. But if you have got a 120mm fan installed on the floor, again, that reduces the power supply length to 180mm. Accessories included with the case, there's not a lot. You get those dust filters and you get a bag with some screws, a motherboard speaker, a few zip ties, and then a user manual. So you don't get any extra panels for like covering cutouts or anything like the side panels I would have liked to have seen on this side to give some ventilation to your graphics card. You don't get anything like that. So there's not much else that comes with the case. 200mm fan, 120mm fan, some dust filters, and then just these few bits and bobs in this bag. So it was about at this point in the original review where we hit the snag with the motherboard tray. The original punched out standoffs interfered with the back of this B550M Aorus Pro motherboard. Must have been quite easy for Thermaltake to redesign the motherboard tray, and now instead of those punched out standoffs, we've got the more sensible and more typical removable, usually brass standoffs. So the new case is here with the new motherboard tray, revised because of Kitguru, and now if I try and drop the same motherboard in place, it goes straight in position, no problem at all, and lines up with all the standoffs. So that means we can now finally carry on with the build, or start the build, because we never even started it. So as well as the B550M Aorus Pro motherboard, we are going to be using an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X CPU. This is the 12 core 24 thread CPU. For memory, we're using the Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro SL. This is the slightly lower profile Vengeance memory, and this is a 32GB kit, DDR4, 3600 megahertz. Storage drive is this one I've been using a lot recently. It's the PNY XLR8 Gaming CS3040, 1TB PCIe Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drive. PNY say this is a great drive for upgrading your PlayStation 5. We think it's better off being put to use inside a PC. And then for graphics, it's the Palit Gaming Pro RTX 3080. Powering the whole system is the Seasonic Focus PX850, 850 watt platinum rated power supply. CPU cooler is the Thermaltake Tough Liquid Ultra 240. So this is a 240mm dual fan all-in-one liquid cooler. And that's about it really. I think case fans will probably stick with what we've got in the case. 200mm up front and then this 120mm exhaust. And I think I'm planning on putting the cooler on this bracket here, and then the fans will be pushing the air out of the system as an exhaust. So finally we can get on with this build. So let's see how it goes. So we're up and running, everything's working as it should be, as you can see. Before I go on and talk about how the build went, I just want to have a look at the thermal performance. The main thing for me with the build is that the revised motherboard tray now works with this motherboard, which is good because that's going to allow you more choice when you're building a system inside this case. We are already limited because this only accepts micro ATX board, so that's great. I've been running my usual thermal performance tests, so I've had the Cinebench R23 benchmark and the TimeSpy Extreme stress test running simultaneously for 60 minutes with the case in various configurations, such as the default configuration with all the panels installed, front panel removed, and then either side panel removed to see how that affects the thermal performance. Temperatures you see in the charts are delta temperatures, which means the ambient room temperature has been deducted from the component temperature to give us a delta. And as you can see with the case in its default configuration, the CPU and GPU temperature was around the mid to low 50 degrees C delta, which means the actual component temperature is in the low 70s, which is good. Removing case panels didn't have a big effect on the temperature. There was a slight reduction with the front panel removed and a 2 to 3 degrees C drop in GPU temperature with the side panel removed. So it shows that this case has good airflow. That open front panel obviously is going to allow plenty of air to come in from the front. 200mm fan works well at the front. You can see I've still got the fans in their default configuration because the front 200mm fan is still at the front of the case working as an intake. The 120mm fan that was in its stock position in the rear of the case still there working as an exhaust, and I've installed the AIO on the side mount that is also working as an exhaust as well, so any heat from the radiator should be instantly pushed out of the side panel. So in terms of the fan speeds during the thermal test, I set a custom fan curve for the AIO fans. So the AIO fans only ramp up when the CPU temperature exceeds 80 degrees C. Below 80 degrees, the fans are running at around 800 to 850 RPM, which is very quiet. And the case fan, so the stock 200mm fan, that is set at a fixed 550 RPM, and the stock rear 120mm fan, that is set at a fixed 800 RPM as well. So the case runs pretty quiet as well. As you can see, changing the configuration of the case didn't make much difference. There was a slight increase when the front panel was removed, but in either configuration we're still below 40 decibels. So if you configure this case well, you can get good thermal performance and low noise as well. So overall, I don't mind this case. It's different in terms of its looks with the almost cube-shaped design. Gives you an alternative to the standard ATX tower setup. There are one or two things that aren't great about the case, probably because this is based on an older case, so tooling is quite old. When you come to things like the installation of your cables and the cable management, like you can see here, there's no cutouts along the motherboard tray or anything like that to pass cables through, so what you end up with is cables that are kind of trailing quite a long way to get where they need to go, such as the front panel audio, and if we had any RGB cables in here, you'd have to trail them quite far back, and the only way to manage the cables really is to bunch them together and zip tie them. But you can see on this motherboard tray there are these little holes. I'm not sure what the purpose are for those holes, but you can get a small zip tie through them, so you can, bunch the cables together and get them looking reasonably neat. Would have probably looked neater if they were through some kind of pass-through cutouts with grommets, but it's not bad. It's only a minor niggle. Installing graphics card is okay. This card is only a 2.5 slot thick card, so it's not too close to the side panel, so thermal performance perfectly fine with that. If you had a thicker card, it may push it, well, it will push it closer to the side panel, could potentially strangle the airflow slightly. AIO installation is easy. There's plenty of space on that side AIO bracket, and you can fit the fans on the outside, so sandwiched between the bracket and the side panel, which is good because then that leaves you a bit more space inside for clearance to memory and stuff, although the bracket is located quite high up in the case, so there doesn't seem to be an issue with tall memory. So if you've got tall RGB memory, plenty of clearance there. And I guess if you really wanted to go mad with this, I think there's probably enough space in here to install custom cooling. You could potentially remove the front 200mm fan and fit a radiator up there instead, maybe two 240mm radiators potentially you could fit in here, and I think there should still be space somewhere for pump raise combo. So it's not a bad case. Like I said, the looks are different. If you like a white case in this cube shaped design with good airflow, this could be what you're looking for. So thank you for watching this review of the Thermaltake Divider 200 TG Air Snow. If you like this case, let us know what you think of it in the comment section. And as always, if you want to help support us, head over to the Kitguru store, pick up some merchandise, or subscribe to our Patreon. And if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.